Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome, everyone. It is Friday night, and you are listening to Paranormal Review Radio, the only radio show without commercials and with more great paranormal talk. I'm Anthony Agati in New York.
And I'm Lucy Liebfried in Chicago. Are you ready for another Paranormal Friday night? We're so happy that you can join us. We welcome all of our regular listeners and those of you who have tuned in for the very first time. If you have a question for our guest or about the topic tonight, feel free to ask us in chat or call into the show at 661-244-9831. We will try to get to you as soon as we can. Don't forget, you can always send us an email with future topics that you would like to see on the show, or if you just want to say hi. Our email address is paranormalreviewradio@yahoo.com. And last but not least, check us out on our Facebook show page and our YouTube channel for more information on the paranormal and upcoming shows.
There is no other event in the world that is life-changing than a near-death experience. For almost every person that experiences an NDE, the world is never again seen as it was before. You cannot deny that this type of experience will create a self-knowledge and self-realization of the person's existence and the purpose for their being. But what about a person who never believed in the afterlife, never believed in paranormal, never believed in a God or religion? What then happens to you after this type of experience? It's not only a self-realization experience, it shakes the core of everything you ever thought to be true and real. To put it into context and play out the opposite, if you believed in God and a religion and suddenly you came close to dying and had a near-death experience, only to realize that all there was is darkness and silence, what then? How do you continue your beliefs after that? How do you change your whole life now that you know the truth? Our guest tonight had a near-death experience almost 30 years ago, and being an atheist and a true scientific-minded person, saw his world completely come to a stop and begin to spin in the opposite direction. But what he experienced was not filled with light and angelic beings. He went into a descent into death that was not peaceful. Howard Storm, author of My Descent into Death, has joined us tonight to share his experience, what he's learned, and how his life has changed for the better. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Howard Storm to the show. Welcome, Howard. How are you tonight?
Hi. Very good, thank you. Happy to be with you.
Great.
Welcome, Howard. I couldn't
Hello.
help. Hi. I couldn't help but notice your last name, Storm, and it almost seems like you were destined to encounter something big and turbulent. So, what was life like for you growing up and in early adulthood? I mean, were you truly a doubter and a skeptic on afterlife and religion?
Yes. My upbringing was extremely chaotic because my father was very abusive, verbally and physically, daily. And so I had two older sisters, and so a lot of drama in the household. And as a result of that, when I was 14, 15-year-old, I was looking for a way, emotionally out of it, also a way physically. I mean, I ran away from home and lived in New York City for a long time. But anyways, when I was 15, I got very into Friedrich Nietzsche, and into existentialism, like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and things like that, and wanted to be like a self-created person, a person beyond emotion, beyond feeling, beyond caring about anybody or anything other than myself. So I considered myself to be highly rational. I was very skeptical. I didn't believe in anything that wasn't scientifically proven.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all, this all began at the age of 15 when I went to college when I was 17 and took a class. Turned out the philosophy teacher I had was an atheist, and I found further support for my views. And when I became a college professor, all the people that I hung out with, all the people I knew, felt the same way. I mean, it was pretty common in the 60s. I'm talking about the 60s going into the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? To me, I personally have a very strong belief in a higher power. And only believing in science seems cold, and to me it just doesn't seem right. And I know in my heart and senses that there is a higher power. Did you ever feel or sense anything that might have been clues that could have led you to change your thinking prior to your near-death experience?
Part of me was there was a little bit of interest, and not in religion or anything like that, but for example, I had read Raymond Moody's book Life After Life sometime in the early 80s, and it seemed to me that it was that sort of thing, near-death experience, were easily explained away as some kind of chemical reaction that the brain had in time of extreme trauma, of dying, that there would, like, endorphins would be released and people would have some kind of, blissful hallucination to help mask the horror and pain of the cessation of life. So when I briefly or lightly looked into things, it was always easy to explain. I mean, basically, myself and my colleagues I was a university professor. My colleagues all believed that religion and everything associated with it was the opiate of the masses. It was just something to control foolish minds with.
Well, Howard, I'm a student of art. I took art history in college. I loved art, and you were a college professor of art. Had you ever had to teach ancient pieces of art that depicted religious icons or came from the Renaissance period that had a lot of those religious overtones to them? I mean, having an atheist belief, was it difficult to interpret and teach that type of art?
Well, I was a studio art teacher. I taught painting, drawing, and design. So whenever, mostly our interest was in modern and contemporary art. I mean, basically our interest in art primarily began in the modern era, in France with realism, like Courbet and Manet, and then went into Impressionism and up to the contemporary art. But, I mean, looking back into Renaissance art or medieval art, it was, we just didn't think about those things. It was just sort of like looking at Egyptian art or Greek art. It was just how curious people believed in that stuff then. Of course, I feel very differently now, but at that time, that's how I felt.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to when you were in Europe. I believe you were on a 3-week tour with your wife and students to learn about the art. Take us back to the day when you had your near-death experience. What happened? And take us through that journey from I believe it happened in the morning, early in the morning.
Right. My wife and I had gone to Delacroix's home and studio. The students were exhausted and kind of in revolt. This was the next to the last day of our tour. We would be going back to the United States the next day. And at 11 o'clock that morning, we'd gone back to the hotel to rally the group to go to the Georges Pompidou Center, which is contemporary French art. And I had a perforation of the stomach, which means a hole suddenly burst in the lining of my small stomach. And what happens is the digestive juices and enzymes and things in your stomach go into your abdominal cavity. And one of the main ingredients of our digestive juices is hydrochloric acid. And so what happened to me was I was standing there talking to one of my students, whose name was Monica, and the next thing I was on the floor kicking, thrashing, screaming because I had the most acute pain I'd ever had in my life happening inside me, in the core of my being. I'm going to kind of rush through this because all of this is sort of, I don't care about this part anymore. But my wife called the desk at the hotel. The desk called an emergency service. A doctor came. He got me off the floor and onto the bed and examined me. And he knew immediately. I mean, he knew within a minute what was wrong. Told us that I had to be rushed to a hospital and that I had to have surgery immediately. Every minute counted. This was life-threatening, and the longer we waited, the worse it would be. So he immediately called an ambulance service. They came, took me a number of miles across Paris in an ambulance going at a very high rate of speed through Paris traffic, which was pretty exciting. I remember that vividly. And I was taken to the big public hospital, which is many city blocks large with different units. Taken to the emergency room. 2 doctors in the emergency room examined me, x-rayed me, took my medical history, told me the same thing that he did. I had to have surgery right away. I would be having it in minutes. It would not be like an hour later. It was going to be now. I mean, everything was like, it's going to be now. And they sent me off on a gurney several blocks away to the surgical hospital. When I got to the surgical hospital, neither my wife or I knew that there was no surgeon at the surgical hospital because it was a Saturday. So I was put in a room, and we waited for this immediate surgery that was going to happen, and time went by, and the pain, which had taken me to the floor kicking and screaming, started to get a lot worse. And what was happening was that the stomach acids and enzymes were migrating from my abdominal cavity, and what I was doing was I was digesting myself internally. My organs were being digested, and the pain was just like mind-blowing. and I don't mean that in some hippy-dippy way. I mean, this is just like it's just like I felt like I was exploding in my body and in my mind.
And no pain meds or anything like that?
Nothing. The problem was that the people in the emergency room, when I begged them for something, they said, you're going to have general anesthetic in a few minutes. We can't give you anything because it'll interfere with the anesthetics that you're going to get in surgery. And when I got to the surgical hospital, since there was no doctor, I had a very nice French roommate, a 68-year-old gentleman, and he did a lot of the conversing back and forth with the nurses. I never saw a doctor at that hospital until 10 hours later. But anyways, they explained to him that they couldn't give me anything because only a doctor could prescribe medicine. So not only did I not get any medicine, I didn't have a pillow, I didn't have a top sheet, just laying on a bed.
Oh, wow.
And they, when they would occasionally come by, they would explain to us they were trying to get a doctor, and he would be coming any time now. The doctors in the United States told me that this is pretty much like having a burst appendix, and that if you get it within the first few hours, it's probably going to be okay. After 5 hours, the chances of death are almost 100%. Because I don't want to be too medical, but you become too septic. There's too much cooking inside the abdomen.
Right.
So, anyways, as the hours went by, the area that hurt, instead of being a point in my abdomen, became from my groin to my neck. In other words, my entire torso was filled with this pain. And it was very, very hard to breathe. It was the thing that kept going through my head is like, why am I conscious? I thought like when pain got really bad, you went unconscious. And like, why am I conscious? Because
you
can't
pass out.
Stand this. And I'm like, no, why can't I pass out? Anyhow, at 8:30 that night, now this started at 11 in the morning, this now at 8:30 at night, nurse came in and told us, my wife and I, and Monsieur Florent, repeated the questions and the answers several times because we couldn't believe it. She said that they were unable to locate a doctor and they would try and get one for the next day.
Oh, God.
Well, when the nurse said that and abruptly left the room after we made her repeat that several times. Because I couldn't believe it, and my wife couldn't believe it. And I thought about it for a few minutes, and I knew that I was dying. I mean, that would become very evident to me sometime that day. And I was just sort of hanging on, trying not to die, because I was terrified of dying, because I was 38 years old, I was a college professor, wife and 2 kids, house, career, art shows, prizes,
Right.
I was all that good stuff, and you're not supposed to die at 38. I was just hitting my stride, but my career looked like it might be. I had 2 galleries that were handling my work. I was selling some work, So regionally, not nationally or anything, but regionally, I had a reputation, I was named Kentucky Sculptor of the Year and won a big cash prize, whoopee. And
that's great.
You're not supposed to die. You're not supposed to live. I mean, it wasn't like I was run over with a truck. Here I am dying of just sort of blowing up in the middle of me. It's crazy. It makes no sense. I knew that dying was, when you die, that's the end. Nothing else. No consciousness. No nothing.
I mean, at that point, when the nurse came in and said that they wouldn't be able to get a doctor till the morning, I mean, did you think that you would see the morning?
Oh no, I was living. It was extremely hard to breathe because every time that I inhaled, exhaled, it agitated the pain in my abdominal cavity. So I had to breathe by consciously fighting the pain to do that, and it was getting really hard to do it. It was definitely it was an uphill battle that I was losing in the breathing thing, and I was very clear that to not breathe would be very, very bad. That would be, breathing was important, and I was trying to breathe as little as possible, but still. My whole body was screaming to not breathe, and I'm trying to keep my mind going. Like, you've got to suck some air and you've got to blow some air out. You've got to do this. You have to do this. You have to do this. That's all I'd been thinking about for hours. I didn't have any conversation with my wife or Monsieur Florent or anything. I didn't have any time to think about anything. I was just trying to. I was literally just trying to hang on to staying alive. So when she said that, I know, game over. Done. This is, I knew I wasn't going to make it another half an hour or an hour. It was, So I told my wife, I told her literally, I said, it's time for me to go. Time for us to say goodbye. And I told her to tell my parents that I loved them, tell my sisters I love them, tell my kids I love them, tell them goodbye for me. And that was it. That's all I said. And I closed my eyes to die. And for me, to die was not didn't require any effort on my part. All I needed to do now was to allow it, what I had been fighting for hours, allow it to happen. Easiest thing in the world.
It's inconceivable to, hearing the words that you're just saying right now. It's inconceivable to think of how anyone could endure that, or I even get goosebumps as you were just saying, telling your wife to saying goodbye to everybody. I mean, when you close your eyes and you let things just succumb, just let it all happen, did you feel as though you were going into a sleep, or did you feel as though you were releasing yourself?
Yeah, it felt like going to sleep.
And
it was a tremendous relief. I mean, it was like, I need to get out of this, this state that I was in, out of this pain.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel calmness? Did you feel you had no pain then, or were you feeling anything at all at that point?
No, I was feeling it, but I could feel myself slipping into unconsciousness, and it was like, and I welcomed it.
So is it at that point that you then encountered your near-death experience?
Yes. So the next thing that happened was I was not only conscious, but, and this is hard for people to grasp, I was more conscious than I'd ever been in my life. And to try and give that some measure of reality, what I was amazed at was my eyesight, my hearing, my taste, my touch, all my senses were greatly heightened. And I could go into a lot of detail about that. Like, let me give you an example. Like, I was standing next to the bed by the floor, and I was very aware through the bottom of my feet the texture of the linoleum of the floor. When I looked, I was surprised at the clarity that I had in my vision. In other words, I had complete focus in the whole depth of field. There was no sort of focal point. When you look at something close, everything behind it's blurry and out of focus. Well,
right.
I was also aware that I'm seeing everything with all this remarkable clarity. My field of vision, which for normally is 160 degrees, was like a lot more than that. And I'm like, this is crazy. Wow. It's like, but good, I could smell my roommate's urine.
Wow.
Because he was in the bed next to me, and he was an old man.
Right.
I could smell it. Anyway, so I was like, wow, this is like incredible. This is amazing. And the most important thing was no pain. So I'm having all these heightened senses and no pain, but I was completely clear about my situation, that I was in this hospital on the 4th floor in need of surgery and waiting for a doctor and all that. And so I tried to communicate with my wife. There was no response from her at all. She was on the other side of the bed. That made me very angry that she wouldn't respond to me. I saw that the bed that I had been in now had a new occupant, and on closer examination, I realized that that new occupant bore an amazing resemblance to me, and that was very upsetting, and I didn't want to deal with that because part of me understood what that meant, and part of me refused to believe that. Like that can't be me. It's not
right.
me. That's not me.
Howard, did this happen like in an instant? Was there a sense of time while this was going on?
Well, the whole near-death experience, I came pretty quickly to realize that any sense of time that I'd ever had in my life, I no longer had. As a teacher, you have to have a sense of time. I was an artist. I didn't wear watches. I hated watches. I hated clocks. I never had clocks in my classrooms, and I didn't wear watches, and I had a really terrific sense of time. I just knew. And one of the things that I came to realize very quickly was that's not working for me anymore. So it's funny, when I relate this story, I make time references because, that's the way I think and that's the way we all think. But it's all nonsense in a near-death experience because there are no time references. You're all... The way that I've come to understand it is that you go into the now, which in our experience there is almost no now because we're always living either in the past or in the future, and the now is so elusive because it's always fleeting away. But in the near-death experience, the now is the only time. And I know that sounds kind of confusing, but forgive me if a lot of this stuff is pretty ultimately ineffable.
No, it's making sense. And so when you're in this state, all of your senses are heightened. Typically a lot of near-death experiencers profess about this, bright light and tunnel type of deal. Was that the same for you? Did you feel a white aura? Did you feel any of that, that loving, that caring, that embracing, or was it just that the senses were heightened and that you were aware of things?
No, that was much later in the experience. Something really terrible happened before that. So do you want me to go into that?
Yes.
Yeah, take us through that. So what happens next after you've now looked at everything?
Yeah, so I'm in the room. I can't communicate with my wife. I can't communicate with my roommate, who had been very kind to us all day. He was a very pro-American guy, really nice guy. Actually, a wonderful guy. But he wouldn't acknowledge me. Of course, I didn't realize that they couldn't see me or hear me. I'm screaming at them. I'm gesturing at them and get nothing back from them. So it made me very agitated. And I heard people outside the room calling me by name. And they were saying, "Come with us. Let's go. Hurry up." So I went over to the doorway of the room and I said, "I'm sick. I'm supposed to have surgery. Are you from the doctor? I need an operation." They said, "We know all about you. We've been waiting for you. There's no more time for talk. It's time to go. Hurry, let's go." So I assumed that the people that stayed out in the hallway beyond the light of the room. The room was lit, but the hallway was unlit, and it's night. I assumed that they were hospital personnel to walk me to my surgery, which, considering the conditions of the hospital, that didn't seem that hard, hard to believe that you would get walked to your surgery. Anyways, so I went into the hallway, and these people encircled me, but it was dark and fuzzy, and my sense of clarity of vision was now just the opposite. Everything was kind of like hazy, foggy, like a really bad black and white TV picture. The best I can describe it. Really grainy, grays, shapes and things. So anyways, they encircled me and we started walking this way, and then we walked and walked and walked, and that walk went on for, not to confuse anyone, but for an eternity. When I say eternity, I just mean time without limit of any kind.
Right.
And gradually, imperceptibly, it got darker and darker and darker, and also gradually the people around me, instead of being officious, started to become hostile, and I started to hear little bits and pieces of scary things. Like, I would hear people say, "He's going to be fun," and so on. Be careful! Don't say anything. Don't scare him. Don't scare him. Stuff like that, and making me really paranoid.
Sure.
So finally, we're in abject darkness. I can't see a thing. There's a lot of people around us now. With the original group, which might have been 8 or 10 or something, now from voices. My only measure is voices because of complete darkness. There's a lot of people, maybe hundreds. Impossible for me to say, but I'm in a mob, in the center of a mob, And I said, I'm not going to go with you any further. And they said, oh, yeah, well, you're almost there. And so they started to push and pull. I started to fight back. And then I became the center of their attention and what they... I'm quite certain about their motivation is what they wanted to do with what they were doing to me, which was biting, pulling, tearing, scratching, was they wanted me to be emotionally where they were, in the same state of being, which was hopelessness and despair. And I'm sure in that place there was some sort of hierarchy or dominance, and some people were victimized more than others, and some of them were more the victimizers. But anyway, so I was being, in a sense, indoctrinated into their world, a world of just basically torment and hopelessness. And I fought as hard as I could. A lot of the stuff I don't like to talk, obviously I don't like to talk about it. So anyways, they are good at what they do, and they know how to inflict pain, and they know how to humiliate. And there's no holds bar in what they did to inflict pain on me and to humiliate me in ways that I would like to think no one in this world could possibly imagine.
Were you able
eventually
to?
I was. What?
Were you able to see any faces? Were you, or you know?
No.
You mentioned the dark figures, but were you able to see any kind of features from them?
No.
Nothing.
No.
But you literally felt everything they were doing to you. Is that correct?
Yes. So eventually, I was no longer responsive. I was lying on the ground of that place, and a lot of my parts were ripped open. I know that my guts were spilled out all over the place. And I'm lying there, and one of the things is, why am I alive? I can't. How can I be alive? How can I be feeling this? It's not possible. I mean, this is all crazy. It makes no sense. You can't be torn apart and still be alive.
Right.
But I was, and they were no longer very interested in me, and people were coming by and kicking me, and I couldn't even respond to it anymore because I had nothing left to respond with. And at that point, I heard a voice, which I think was my voice, but I didn't do this consciously or willingly. And the voice said, "Pray to God." And I thought, what a stupid idea. I don't believe in God. And the voice said, "Pray to God." And I thought, I couldn't pray if I wanted to because I don't know how to pray. And a third time the voice said, "Pray to God." And I thought, when I was a child, I went to Sunday school, and we used to say prayers. What were those prayers? And I wasn't really intending to pray. I simply wanted to remember what I had learned as a child, because this voice was telling me to do this, and I wasn't going to pray, but I wanted to remember. I wanted to remember what a prayer might be like in case I chose to do that. And
right.
In my frustration, I began muttering things that were basically anything that I remembered as a child. So there's the Pledge of Allegiance, bits and pieces of the Pledge of Allegiance and the Gettysburg Address and the 23rd Psalm and Lord's Prayer, and just bits and pieces of anything and everything. But the interesting thing is that whenever I muttered a phrase that had God in it, the people around me became very, very angry. And they were screaming at me, "There is no God, nobody can hear you, and we are going to hurt you much worse, and you must stop." But they didn't say it that way. They said it in very, very vulgar ways, which won't even attempt to repeat. And for the first time since I'd been in their company, I was able to get back at them. I was able to, frankly, infuriate them. And that encouraged me to start praying with bits and pieces of things that I could recall from my childhood, because the only thing I knew about prayer was that you memorize these things and recite them. That's what I thought prayer was, which, of course, is a form of prayer, but not, very mature understanding of prayer. Anyhow, so they're screaming at me and backing away from me. And I'm trying to say this stuff and remember things to say, and I mean, one of my favorite phrases was, "Glory, glory, hallelujah, his truth goes marching on." Anyhow, I found myself all of a sudden saying this stuff, and there was nobody. It seemed like there was nobody around, and I realized that they had retreated far enough away so that they could no longer hear me.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped praying and started thinking about my situation, and that was, in a way, worse than what they had done to me. Because when I thought about my situation, it seemed completely hopeless that I was going to be stuck in this world with them forever, and that one of the things that I considered was the only way that one could not be victimized in this place was to be worse than they were. In other words, I don't want to be torn, I don't want to be gouged, I don't want to be probed, I don't want to be bitten anymore. But the only way that that's not going to happen is if I become worse than they are. I do it to them first.
Right.
And I didn't really want to do that. The idea was repulsive to me. The whole place was repulsive. And I thought about my situation, and what I realized was that as I thought about my life and how thoroughly mediocre I had been as an artist and son, brother, husband, neighbor, teacher, I realized that this is what happens to people like me. You get flushed down the toilet into the cesspool, and now I was in the cesspool with the other garbage. And that's what I thought about myself and my life, that I had lived a garbage life, and now I was going to experience the consequences of that. And it was, and the hopelessness and despair was just unbelievably horrible. And that, once again, this is like time without measure. So this just, sinking into that self-pity and hopelessness, really, that was really the depth, literally, figuratively, emotionally, the experience. And then the good stuff started to happen. So do you want me to keep going?
When did it change?
I'm lying there pretty much thinking there's no way out of this. This is forever. The only way that this is ever going to change is it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And my memory of myself as a little child sitting in a Sunday school classroom singing "Jesus Loves Me" came into my mind. But when the memory came into my mind, I could see it visually. I could hear it. This is all in my. I was aware this was in my head, but I could see it in my head. I could hear it in my head, and most importantly, I could feel what I had felt as a child. That there was this other that we called Jesus, who loved me, cared about me, heard my prayers, watched over me, protected me. And this was the first hope that I had in this complete hopelessness. And I briefly started to think, but I don't. I started to think I don't believe in that. I don't know if it's true. I mean, it couldn't be true. Why would he care? You know, even if he was, and he isn't. And I started to go down that road, and I said, I'm not going down here. Done that all my life. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of, you know, going around and around on this stuff. So I just called out into the darkness in desperation, Jesus, please save me, with absolutely no sense of whether anyone could hear me, if he existed, if it was true, or any of that. It was just pure, utter desperation, based on a childhood memory of something that had occurred 30 years earlier in my life. And he came.
And you spoke with him, and he spoke with you.
Yeah, he came and he touched me and healed me and loved me and embraced me and took me out of that place. And we traveled away from the world of darkness towards a world of light. We did a life. He called over some people that are referred to as angels, for lack of a better term, and we did a life review, which was turned out to be extremely unpleasant because, I mean, as the child, starting with birth and going through childhood was all really fun and happiness, but as I became the completely egotistical, emotionally closed off person that I became, which, by the way, was pretty successful. I mean, I was a tenured professor at the age of 25. That's not too shoddy, you know?
Right.
You know, I mean, being a SOB can be quite rewarding, you know? And so from a societal point of view, I was successful, and I you know, I had enough of an upbringing growing up in Massachusetts that I knew how to be polite and well behaved, and so I knew how to play the game of getting my way and seeing to my own interests. Sometimes I was a good husband, and sometimes I wasn't interested in being a husband at all. Sometimes I was a good father. Sometimes I was completely a negligent father, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But anyways, so the life review was increasingly difficult. And there were many times as the life review progressed that I begged them to stop showing me stuff, but they said that it was important that I see it. So we went through my life chronologically, experiencing what I did to other people, hearing their thoughts, feeling their feelings. Don't ever want to have that kind of life review again. And when it was over, Jesus said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "I've got a million questions." And he said, "Go ahead." And so I asked him everything that at that time I could think of to ask, and everything I asked, he answered clearly and beautifully, including lots of what I like to refer to as lots of audiovisual aids. For example, I'd ask him a question about something, and I don't know if we went there or not, but it was like we were in it. You know, if I asked him a historical question, we'd be there. And we'd experience it, and he'd show me, which was like pretty amazing stuff. I asked him questions about the future, and we'd go there and be in it. But of course, most of the questions that I asked him were about me, because that's what I was really interested in. And that was pretty interesting. Anyhow, when I couldn't think of anything more to ask him, I had my last question, which was really more of a statement than a question, was, I said, I want to go to heaven now. Because we had talked a lot about heaven, and heaven's like a really fun place, really interesting. You know, a place that anybody in their right mind would want to go to heaven. And he said, you're not going there. Not now. Maybe someday, but not now. You have to go back to the world. And so he and I had a huge argument, and I argued as passionately as I possibly could for him to allow me to go to heaven, and he calmly and rationally explained to me why my arguments were flawed and that ultimately this world was where I needed to be. And so when he defeated me with his superior arguments, I accepted it, and I said, I'll go back. And with that, I was back. It was now when I became conscious again, it was around 9 o'clock. And when I came back into the pain, which actually took my breath away, so I was gasping. And the nurse who had been in the room at 8:30 re-entered the room and said, the doctor has now arrived at the hospital and you're going to have your surgery. And they threw my wife out of the room and they prepped me for surgery, which I had at 10 o'clock.
Wow. Well, you know what, Howard? It seems like there were some things that were revealed to you and when you finally had left that area of grayness. And one of the things, it seems like the sense of love was the greatest thing. Now, there are many people who say right now they're becoming aware of the sense of love. And in fact, a lot of what I had read that was said is almost the same as what you were told. You know, the things that people are saying now sound very, very similar to what you were told and what you experienced. In your opinion, is this awakening that everyone's having, is this part of God's plan?
Absolutely. I have a friend who lives down in Florida. He and his partner have AIDS. They're my age, and they've been successfully living with AIDS for a very long time. Anyways, he made a bumper sticker for me, which I love, which said, "Life is a classroom, love is the lesson." And it's really pretty much that simple. We were put. I mean, I'll tell you what I can tell you everything that I learned from this experience. We were put in this world to learn how to love. Love is very, very interesting subject, very complicated, and not as easy as it seems. And that's what God created us for. And if we make a reasonable effort at doing that, God wants us to be with God forever and to grow even more loving and to learn more about love and to participate in the greater universe, which is far bigger than the physical universe that we know, as a loving being. Because God is love, and we were created to participate in that love. And if we reject the lesson, then we don't have any role in it. So we get to go to a place where it's not imposed on us anymore. And with the absence of love and the absence of all the goodness of God, it's a pretty miserable place.
Okay.
Howard, you had talked about going down that hallway, that dark hallway with those dark beings. I mean, can you say that you were steps away from hell?
Can I say what? I didn't quite understand. Can I say that?
Can you say that you were sort of steps away from being in hell?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think hell is very complex. I think there's probably unlimited aspects to hell, depending upon what's in the darkness of their godless, loveless hearts. Those are the people that go to hell. I mean, that's why I use that term. And I had my experience, and I think there's unlimited types of experiences that people could have apart from heaven, outside this world.
When you were going through this experience, did your wife or say anything to you that the doctors came in and pronounced you dead? Was any of that ever come through? Like, I don't know if you were even hooked up to anything, because obviously you had no pain meds, but I'm not sure if you were hooked up to anything.
I wasn't hooked up to anything. Nobody ever took my blood pressure or my temperature that entire day at the surgical hospital, and I never saw a doctor in that hospital, and there was no doctor in the hospital, so nobody ever pronounced me or anything, no.
Right, so if you weren't hooked up, there's no way to even tell if you were clinically, quote-unquote, clinically dead or not.
Right. But I've talked to a number of doctors about this. I have several friends that are doctors, and they all said I was toast. By all medical reason, I was a goner. And the doctors are like, we don't know how you made it. You should have,
right,
but you did.
Right.
Well, Howard, while you were going through all this, did you have the sense, that you knew you were dead?
Oh, I figured that out. Yeah. When I went into that place of darkness, it occurred to me that I was very clear this wasn't Kansas anymore. It was definitely someplace else.
Well, many people, they have their beliefs, and they seem to no longer subscribe to an organized religion, but they do still have a belief in God or a higher power. Now, is the disillusionment part, is that disillusionment part of waking up to the truth?
Well, it's a great question, and I can't give you a real simple answer, because first of all, and I know that I'm simply speaking from my own experience. So this is like some big universal truth. Although I've got enough ego that I kind of wish it was everybody's experience. But anyway, that was a sort of a joke, self-depreciating joke there. But anyways, when I came back, nobody believed me. Everybody laughed at me. Everybody told me I was crazy. Everybody told me to get over it. It never happened. It was a dream, blah, blah, blah. Everybody. My wife, my mother, my kids, my friends, everybody. And I was very, very lonely. So I went, as I was, there was months in hospitals and more surgery, and it was a huge, long recuperation. So I had a lot of time by myself. This went on for many, many months. And so I had a lot of time to think and meditate and pray and read. And I started reading voraciously. And I read the Bible. I read things in Buddhism and the Bhagavad Gita and Baha'i and Hinduism and Islam. I read the Quran, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that resonated with me by far the most was the Christian tradition. And one of the people that I became very, very excited about was Thomas Merton, who was a monk in Kentucky who wrote a lot of really fine books. Anyways, he became my chief mentor. I was also very interested in Teilhard de Chardin, and so anyways, the thing that excited me the most was Christianity. That made sense. And then, as I thought about it, I realized that because of my culture, which is who I am, I'm not from India, and I don't, that's not my. God bless them, but I don't. I'm not them. I'm a, white, European descended American guy in the 20th century at the time. that's who I am, and the culture is a Christian culture, and that's how I was seeing things, and so I threw myself into Christianity. Now, when I was able, I got involved with the church, and as I became involved with church, I was aware that the church ideally is a great institution, but there's all these people that go there, and they mess it up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you could get rid of all the people out of the church, you could have a perfect church, but the minute you allow one human being into it, you know, you bring in all the human flaws into it, too.
Right.
So anyways, since I saw myself as a flawed human being, and I did not see myself as some kind of ascended avatar, you know, I mean, I saw myself as a man trying to, you know, get a grip on life. I decided that the Christian church, for better or for worse, with all of its warts, was the place where I could find like-minded people and I could be accepted. And that's exactly what happened. I fell in love with not only the local church, but I fell in love with Christianity. And if I may quote Mother Teresa, and this is an exact quote, she was asked by a reporter once what she was in India, and she was asked, what do you think of all these other religions? Because, of course, in India, Christianity is only a little tiny minority religion. And Mother Teresa said, I love all religions, but I love my own the best. And so I will stand on Mother Teresa's ample shoulders on that one. You know, I think that's really beautiful.
Well, just to go a little bit further on that one, I heard your answer to the following, and I really would like to hear it again. What religion is the best to become closer to God?
Right. Well, I want to be clear that I am going to quote Jesus Christ, Son of God, King of Kings, Lord of Lords in this one, okay? This is from his lips to my ears, from my lips to your ears. The best religion is the one that brings you closest to God. And I was totally unhappy with that response at the time because that's not what I was looking for. And I think as I've had a chance to think about this for almost 30 years, I think it was an absolutely brilliant answer, something far beyond anything I could have ever conceived.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that it's completely true. And so, but there was also a follow-up question to that, which I asked him, but which one? You know, I mean, which was the one that brings you closest to God? I want, you know, and of course what I was thinking of, he's going to say something like Lutheran or Catholic or Baptist or something. And he said, there are good people in bad religions, and there's bad people in good religions. And I want to make this really clear that I have gone out of my way to participate with people in all kinds of religious services and different practices, and gone out of my way to try and speak with Muslims and Jews and Buddhists and, you know, I've never met a Zoroastrian yet, but I think they're pretty interesting. But anyways, I've talked to lots of people, Native Americans, spirituality, et cetera, and I think that the answer is, once again, absolutely brilliant. That, you know, I've met absolutely great Catholics, and I've met Catholics that were not so great. You know, I've met wonderful Hindus, and I haven't met any bad Hindus, but I'm sure there's plenty of Hindus that I wouldn't want to have anything to do with. Whatever, you know.
Right.
Well,
it's not ultimately about religion. It's about your relationship with God.
Mhm. Well, the book My Descent into Darkness was only published in 2005, but your experience happened a few decades ago. Why did you wait to write about the story?
Okay. Well, the answer is painfully simple. When I went back to the university, I ran into a psychology professor who was interested in near-death experiences, and we, of course, became immediate, very close friends. And his name is Scott. And Scott said that there was a group called Friends of Ions, which is International Association of Near-Death Studies, that met monthly at a Swedenborgian church in Cincinnati, and that I should come. So he took me to the meetings, and it was like wonderful for me because it was a room full of people that included some experiences and a lot of people that were interested in experiences. So it was great for me to find a support group and a place where we could talk about it. And there was an old man there who kind of adopted me, and he and I used to have lunches together so he and I could talk about spiritual stuff. And one day he said to me, there's going to be a lot of pressure on you and a lot of people wanting you to write your story in a book. And he said, don't do it, because if you write a book, people are going to think that you're trying to exploit your experience and trying to make money off it, and it'll destroy your credibility. So I really like this old man. He died not too long after that. And his words I took to heart. And so over time, I kept getting requests to write a book. And I didn't think of myself really as a writer. And whenever people said, no, I'm going to write a book, I'm not going to write a book, because what I thought was, if I write a book, his words will come true. People will see me as, somebody just trying to, somebody who makes this stuff up just to try and, sell books and make money. Anyhow, what changed my mind was in 1999, I got a phone call from a publisher in England, and he asked me if I would write my story in a book, and that he wanted to publish it. And so I decided that was the end of my not writing a book spell, and so I did, and the book was published in England in 2000. And then how it got published in the United States in 2005 is an even more amazing story, because it got published by Doubleday, which is a big publisher, which I did not seek out or pursue in any way. They came to me.
Well, Howard, I have to ask you this question, because I know it's on a lot of people's minds who are probably listening right now. How do you know that this experience really happened and that it wasn't a hallucinated dream, with the amount of pain that you were in? I mean, people can conceive the idea that, all that pain, and so it sort of warped your mental abilities. What made it real for you that you know that this really happened?
Okay, I've got several responses to that. I hope I remember to go through them all. One is that the experience was much more real than any experience of what we call reality before or since. In other words, I would suggest to you that if there's a dream or hallucination, it's what you and I are doing right now, because that's reality. This isn't. Okay, that you might say, well, that's nonsense, but because
no, absolutely the opposite.
Okay, and then I'll give you another reason. After the experience, the angels, and on a couple of occasions, Jesus himself visited me. The angels were visiting me daily, and I'm talking about while I was wide awake. During the daytime, they would show up in my room, and we would talk. And I couldn't possibly doubt their reality, because they were now part of my reality, and it was a complete affirmation. And then things were happening in my life that are absolutely miraculous, and there's no rational explanation for them other than the intervention of God in my life. So,
Howard,
I have no doubt at all that what happened.
You know, our show is called Paranormal Review Radio, and we're believers in the paranormal and spirits and the afterlife and many other paranormal phenomena. And I'm very curious to know, what other areas do you now believe in since you've experienced a near-death experience? Do you believe or subscribe to the Bigfoot phenomena or even UFOs, or do you feel that these are one and the same type of experience and all related to God?
Well, in some sense, I'm pretty open to everything. I mean, you know, because let me go back. After my experience, I was way too open, and so I was seeing, hearing, experiencing things that were way too much for me to handle. My psychic abilities just were like crazy into everything. I mean, I could see spirits. I could see into the future. I could see people's see into their hearts and their emotions and things, and it was very overwhelming. Ultimately, I started praying away those things because I felt that I was so separate from the reality that everybody else was experiencing that I was living on one plane of existence and everybody else in the world was living on another plane. You know, people are like interested in what's for supper and you know, what's on TV and you know, who are the Reds playing tonight? I'm like I'm out in this other world that I totally I can't even begin to comprehend. I don't even have words to describe what's going on there. And I decided that I wanted to be more normal. I wanted to be more like everybody else. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on, even far more than people have any idea. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's indifferent, and I think one of our jobs, all of our jobs to do, is to try and discern what is healthy and what's unhealthy, what we should or should not be involved with.
You know, Howard, we ask all our guests, what bit of advice can you give people who may be in the place that you were in before your near-death experience, or maybe struggling with the idea that there may not be a God or a belief in religion? Is there any advice that you can give them?
Yes. I, of course, have wrestled with this question and with real people, you know, struggling with this question for 30 years. You just need to know that eventually I left the university and went to seminary and spent 22 years as a pastor in a Christian church, which I just retired from a year and a half ago. But anyways, my advice is that you don't need to take anybody's word for it. You can find out the definitive answer for yourself by asking God. But you have to ask God in a reverent way. I mean, if you go, you know, you can't, if you say to God, God, prove it, or I'm not going to believe in you, you're going to get nothing. That's not reverent enough. And by reverent, I mean God, creator of the universe, needs to be approached with a certain amount of respect and dignity. And so the way that one can go about having a relationship with God is to go to a sacred place, which could be whatever works for the individual. It might be by the seashore, it might be in the woods, it might be in a church, it could be in an art gallery. I mean, whatever works. Your bedroom, any place that you think is by sacred place, I mean like a place where you feel peace, quiet, serenity, no interruptions, etc. Woods. I think woods are a great place to do it. Seashore is a great place to do it. Rainy Canyon would be a wonderful place to do it. But anyways, you go to a sacred place, get by yourself, sit down, lie down, sit in a chair, get relaxed, and you can. I mean, the most important way to approach God is with complete honesty. And if a person were so inclined to say, God, I totally don't believe in you, and I think you're a big fraud, whatever. I mean, if that's what you need to say it. I mean, just what God wants. And Jesus told me this. God wants us to lay our cards out on the table. Don't hold back anything. Just get it all out there and say, God, now that I've said it all, and you know where I'm coming from, I would like to hear from you. I would like to know something about you, and sit there and wait. And if you have to wait an hour, 2, 3, 6, whatever, wait. I mean, I've asked people to do this, and to my knowledge, it typically works out amazingly for them.
Well, Howard, are you still receiving images and visions from the angels now?
Sometimes I do. Not at my. I mean, it's not like I can just conjure it up, but God's working with me.
Well, are you planning to write more books in the future?
Yeah, I'm working on one now. I'm writing my spiritual journey right now, and I'm trying to be brutally honest about the journey before the experience, a little bit during the experience, and a lot afterwards. I'm in a good place now because I'm retired. I don't have to worry about offending anybody because, I will only say kind words about Social Security and my pension from the church.
Well, Howard, we want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It was an amazing show, and we wish you the best of luck in everything. God bless.
Absolutely. God bless you, Howard.
Well, thank you. God bless you too, as well.
Great. Take care now. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. You too. Good night.
I'm waiting for you to respond, Lucy.
I'm still taking it all in, and I am thinking about it. You know what? I can't help but think there are certain points when he started talking about after his experience, his voice did change, and you could really sense when he was first talking about what happened immediately, being in the area of grayness. You can almost, he was reliving it. I mean, it felt, he really was not comfortable talking about that. I mean, I really sensed that. But once he started talking about afterwards, it's like everything else. He has found his own truth. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he was reliving the experience as he was talking about it. You can tell the way that his tone of voice was, and the fear, I'm assuming, that came upon him as he was telling the story. I mean, when he was telling us about how he was laying there in the hospital with no pain meds, and I mean, I've gone through medical things in my life, and I've had I've had a few bouts with some tremendous pain, and I was feeling that again as he was talking about it, and so I can sort of relate myself to that story. And as he was talking and saying how much pain he was in and how he just couldn't go on anymore, and it was just becoming too much, and to turn around and say to his wife, I think it's time that I go. I don't know. I could never. I can't picture myself ever having a moment like that. And I don't think anybody can.
No.
But I
you know
think
what's really weird is
what
he was describing, okay? You know about this, that I had my appendix burst, I want to say, about 5 years ago, and it was misdiagnosed. The doctor thought that it was gallbladder. And I was literally in pain for, a good most of a day. And they never realized that I had a burst appendix. And it was after the fact that they told me how bad it was. But all the while that this was happening, I never once had a thought of this is it. For some reason, I always knew that there was a solution to what was happening to me. But to hear him say that at one point he literally just gave up, and that's the whole part of this that I don't understand with not believing in a higher power, regardless of who you call it. I almost want to say, with the situations that happen in life, and I understand where he's coming from. He said that his chaotic childhood, but there's still that no matter what science puts ahead of you or puts in front of you, I just can't comprehend thinking that this is it, that this is all there is. So when you're faced with a situation like that, it's almost like it seems very frightening that he would actually be in the situation and say, okay, that's it. This is the end. Does that make sense?
Yes, it sort of does make sense. I mean, if you want to compare stories, I have one of total opposite, and I think you know this story too. About 10 years ago, I had come back from a vacation, went to sleep, and the next day was in and out of a consciousness. I mean, till this day, nobody knows what actually happened to me. But in that process of me going in and out of consciousness, I was taken to the hospital. And the hospital, I guess one of their routines was to take a spinal tap, the lumbar puncture. Right. And in doing so, I had a process of 3 different people doing it on me. And the first person who did it on me, and again, I was still in and out of consciousness as this was going on. And so I really wasn't paying attention or I couldn't be responsive to anything. And so when the first person did it, the nurse or whoever it was, when they put the needle into my spine in the back, I felt a fiery pain on my right side. I did acknowledge that. They stopped, and then I noticed another person walked into the room. They did it, and when they did it, the left side of my body it was like electrified almost. And I was in agony and pain, and I told them that, and I reacted to that. The third person that came in finally did it correctly. And so what they did was they sat me up on the side of the bed, leaning forward onto, that rolling table that always is over you when you're in the bed so you can eat. So I'm leaning on the side of the bed on the bed, holding myself up on this rolling table thing, and the person was doing the spinal tap. And they told me to sit still and wait for a little bit. And as I was sitting there, I don't know, I couldn't tell time, but one of my family members came to the door, my friend came to the door, to the room where I was at, and she fainted and passed out because what she saw was the vial in my back still left in there and the spinal fluid dripping onto the bed, and it had soaked the sheets. And what they had done was left me in that room for approximately 10-15 minutes as my spinal fluid was depleting out of my body. It looked as if I was a faucet, and the spinal fluid was just dripping out of this little vial piece that was on my spine. And after that happened, obviously, because you're depleting your fluid in your brain, the level of the fluid in my brain had gone down, and so the pressure from the brain onto the skull was enormous. And the pain, I can't even describe it to anybody to show how it felt. But at that point, when I was going through this, and it was for a period of a week, where I finally actually recovered enough to be actually conscious, I gave up. I kept saying I couldn't deal with the pain anymore. I couldn't. First of all, I wasn't able to speak or react or be semi-normal. And all I kept saying was, and every time I would come back to consciousness, I'd say, I feel the pain, and I said, I can't do it anymore, and I'd go back into a sleep. So I can understand how he could say, while Howard's in bed, and saying with that pain that you can't anymore. You can't go on, regardless of what you know or may not know what may happen to you after you die. It's just that pain. And knowing that pain is the reality at that moment, you can't bear it any longer. I mean, we just got over September 11th, right? So
right.
I live in New York, and I remember that day. And still to this day, there are pictures that you see on the internet of people who were hanging outside of the Twin Towers, flagging sheets or whatever it was that they were trying to get people's attention, and others were leaping to their death because that fire was too much for them. The act of, or the reality of knowing that you could be burned alive was so tremendous enough that they felt the need to make the decision to leap out of that building. Even though they knew they would die that way as well, they took the lesser of the evil. I mean, it's a choice that you make that you cannot even comprehend. And so, to me, I understood and I understand why he would give up at that point and just go into a sleep. To me, I understand it. So that's why I'm saying I'm sort of the opposite of the way that you felt, Lucy.
Right. And like I said, for me, it was painful, and I knew that it was not my gallbladder. I knew that there was something more to it, but there's something inside of me that never, ever, ever considered giving up. Never, ever considered. And it was almost like I knew I would be okay, even though you could see it, you could literally see it on people's faces when they finally found out that the appendix had ruptured and that all of the whatever, was seeping into my body. I was becoming septic. I never once, there was just something in me that just never, ever, ever considered giving up. Now, I don't ever remember going into any kind of near-death experience. It was like I was conscious through this whole thing. I remember the pain. I remember everything. But there was never a point where my consciousness ever said, okay, this is it. I just could not do that.
In preparation for the show tonight, you know me, I always go then online and or to a bookstore and try and see if I can find anything that may interest and bring a little bit more of an insight to the topic to the show, not just hearing from our guests, which is always great to have. But I usually tend to, I always tend to go one bit further and get more information, more research. I love to read about things. That's just the craziness that I am. But I found this great website, and I have it up actually on my laptop right now. It's called the Institute of Noetic Sciences, NOETIC, Institute of Noetic Sciences. And believe it or not, this organization was formed by Edgar Mitchell. And if you're all familiar with astronomy and astronauts and space and NASA, Edgar Mitchell was an Apollo 14 astronaut. And he started this organization to explore more of unexplainable phenomenon, and that includes pretty much everything within paranormal. But the area of near-death experiences, he has a section in here, or his group has a section in here on the physics of near-death experiences, a 5-phase theory. And I think it's really interesting if people are inquisitive enough to learn more about near-death experiences. I think this is a great, it's actually 14 pages long because I actually printed it up as well. They go into the phenomenon of near-death experiences, and they talk about how the experience is and how it's experienced from the individual, and all of the examples that are given, the separation from the physical body, the journey through the tunnel, the presence of light, and then, returning back into the tunnel and going back into your body. They bring up those areas, those 5 specific areas, and what they do is they tackle the idea of what an experiencer experiences, seeing the light, feeling the love, all of that stuff, and then to encourage it and to beef up the science for a near-death experience. They talk about the physics of it and how what is happening in the body and what is happening in your mind is actually correspondent to physics itself. And they talk about how there's a photon, there's a light within your body that is ignited shortly before you are about to die or before you are about to experience a near-death experience. And this photon is basically what everybody calls your soul. And scientifically, this photon is then able to travel within space. And they go into so many things about even the tunnel, and they compare what people talk about the tunnel, they compare the tunnel to a wormhole in the universe. And photons are the only subatomic particle, if I don't know my sciences, but I'm thinking if it's a subatomic particle, photons are the only things, and this is scientifically been proven, that photons are the only things that actually can travel through a wormhole in the universe. And so this wormhole could, in essence, be the tunnel that everybody talks about. And if we are this photon going through this wormhole, it could be that is the same relevance to a near-death experience. I may not be explaining it right, Lucy, but I really would love everyone to go to it and just type into Google Institute of Noetic Sciences. And there's the section on there, which I think is issue number 23, and this is from June of last year, of 2012, but it's called The Physics of Near-Death Experiences, a 5-Phase Theory. I think it's really interesting if people want to learn more about it and maybe possibly even learn more about the scientific proven abilities that is sort of backing up near-death experiences. I think that's a great article to read and to learn about.
I'm looking at the site right now, and again, it's touching on the scientific explanation. So, see, this is where my problem comes in. Again, the science versus the belief in a higher power. Sure, I think it is. I'm sure there's a way for science to explain everything that happens. But I'm going to what's inside of me, the belief that I have, and I don't know where it comes from or that. I really have a hard time believing that it's just a simple science. Well, that it's a scientific process. I think there's much more to it. The fact that we're this photon. Well, how is it that the consciousness? How does that consciousness relate to this particle that's traveling? I mean,
they talk about it in there.
They do?
They actually talk about the consciousness. I mean, it is a really great piece of work, and I'm really surprised that it's coming from Edgar Mitchell. But then again, not so, because he was such a scientific professional. And so he has that background. He has that knowledge of it. And what he's doing is he's melting the two together. And he's trying to formulate the theory and back up the theory of near-death experiences with science, with physics, so that you can possibly get an understanding. Now, whether or not he's right or wrong, I don't know. I don't know, but he gives a good argument to the fact that these proven physic records and experiments that have happened within science can be correlated to, in specific, this near-death experience phenomenon. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's you know me. I always like to put everything out there and have everybody else make their own opinion of it. But I'm not doing my job if I'm not giving out that information to have it in people's possessions to be able to read on their own.
Well, okay, going with that theory and that argument, I found it very interesting that Howard, when he described what he was going through, he did not mention a light. He didn't mention anything like that. He mentioned grayness. He mentioned darkness, as opposed to the majority of near-death experiencers that do say that they see a light or they have a sense of warmness. What Howard experienced seems to be the complete opposite. It was a lack of light, a lack of warmth, and it just seemed to be physically being put into something that was completely different than what most near-death experiencers talk about.
Could it be that he was going to another dimension, and his dimension is different than what other people talk about when they talk about near-death experiences? Because there are two sides to a near-death experience story. There is that love and light, and seeing your family members that have passed on before, and friends and family, and all of that goodness. But then there are those other stories where people say they've gone to hell and back. But to them, the hell is a conception that they've created in their mind as what hell would be, or what hell would feel like. And so we all know, we've heard about the stories from people who've talked about other dimensions, where there are lower dimensions and there are beings there that are just, not as happy and loving as the beings that are on other dimensions. And so his path may have been going through to that other dimension. I don't know. It's a good argument to talk about and bring up and discuss, but
it is, and then it also leads me to start thinking about the concept of hell itself. I mean, there's many descriptions. I mean, through history and literature, hell seems to be different things to different people. I mean, to the Christians, of course, there's the fire and brimstone. But, I mean, just what exactly is hell? I mean, there's people that will argue that what we go through every single day, looking at what was said about, that this is not reality, that the actual reality was what he went through. I mean, could we be in hell right now? I mean, that's something else.
I think we are.
I mean, it opens up another, again, one question brings up two more, the concept of hell. I mean, what exactly is that? I mean, is what he went through his own version of hell, or is this a vision, like you said, of a different plane?
Well, I think we have a caller, and I think I know who it is.
I know who it is, too.
Why don't we ask this person, Noah, what is hell?
Ta-da! Thank you guys for letting me on the air. I've been chomping at the bit.
I could feel it. I could feel it coming through.
Well, there's so much that you guys have mentioned that I'll make it brief and interrupt or ask questions. But here's the thing. What you were saying about that photon, Anthony, really resonated with me. As a 10-year student of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which I listen to it on my iPod when I go to sleep. I've studied it intensely. The Tibetan Book of the Dead talks about various realms. When you pass away, there are several realms that you pass into, and they have the hungry ghost realm, the hell realms, and you don't necessarily see a light depending on where you were when you passed away.
Right.
And the book tells you how to navigate through that. And the gray area actually would be the hungry ghost or the hell realms, meaning not that he was being damned eternally, but that he would have to work through his karma in Buddhism because he had no belief. So that, when you have a belief system, and I'll touch on that in just a second, that kind of sets up what you're going to see. But with him, it sounded like he was in what they call the bardos, in between life and death. And to me, he sounded confused about what exactly he saw. And I think that it's interesting for me to hear somebody talk about what I perceived as a Buddhist experience that had no religion. The other thing about that photon I wanted to mention, too, in Hinduism, they have, well, let me jump back. Hinduism and Buddhism, they're older than Christianity. And the cool thing is, science keeps proving what their mystics have said a long time ago. And, Lucy, I like what you said about, but what about our beliefs? I agree. And I love when science can actually back that up even further. Because our beliefs, we know what we know, but when science can step in and say, here's what we found, it's much more profound. And the Dalai Lama, in regards to the Tibetan Book of the Dead and other things, he's found that that most of what people have sensed in the past or experienced, it's been proven by science. Likewise, in Hinduism, what they call the self, the abiding self, they say is no larger than the top digit of your thumb. And that molecule, that spark of divinity, was never born, it never dies. And like you were talking about, Anthony, how that your consciousness is passed through that, and I want to read more about what you were discussing. All the Hindu greats, the mystics, they said that yourself is tiny, but at the same time, your consciousness, your life experience is carried over, whether, and I don't know about reincarnation, but into the next life or into the next realm. But a lot of things you guys are saying, it really, in the context of other religions, because we're so saturated in Judeo-Christianity, if people look at other religions, you can see definite parallels to their experiences, which again line up with science. I'm going to pause for the cause, and then I have something else.
Okay. What do you
guys think of that?
I just want to read. This is one little excerpt from what I was talking about, the Noetic Institute, and it says, as we approach the end of life, our sensorial observation decreases, our normal consciousness fades, and deep down in our physical body, at the atomic and subatomic level, a fundamental process starts that release an exotic energy, that is, light energy or photons. I believe this exotic energy is the foundation of another new, pure, and perfect body, as well as another kind of consciousness or awareness. With this new body of exotic photons, we can travel through the barrier of space and time, and those who experience an NDE often report. I think that is what you were just describing as I'm not finding the words right now to express it, but to me it seems as though that there is this spark that happens and is created, and it starts off when someone is about to die, when they're about to either die or go through a near-death experience, that this, what I call a soul, sparks, it ignites. And that is then the essence of you that is physical but non-physical, where you're able to pass through the barriers of the things that are unseen to the human mind and to humans, to be able to travel into wherever it is that we go to after this. I mean, I don't know if I've just confused the hell out of myself and you guys, but
you know what?
I can understand it. I think I can understand it, and I just need a little bit more time with this. But I think it does make a little bit of sense, because there are other things that I'm thinking about, Lucy, right now that, and you and I have talked about this, about similarities within the paranormal, and this is just hitting on it. And I really do want to read more on this article because I think what it's saying is what I've been believing for a while now, and what I've tried to explain to myself, and what I'm going to try to explain to a lot of people, hopefully soon.
Well, okay. I hear what you guys are saying about the consciousness and how this sparks this thing, but it takes me to the opposite end. What about the consciousness that starts when you're born? How does that start, and how does that consciousness, we're born, we have a consciousness, maybe we're not aware of it as an infant, maybe we are. How is it that when we're at the end of this body's life, how does that consciousness respark again? I mean, is it something that's always been there and it's dormant, or is it something that, do you see what I'm saying? I mean,
you're talking about reincarnation then, right?
No, not necessarily, because not everyone has that sense of reincarnation. It's almost like people, when a person is born and there's no sense of reincarnation or anything, when does that initial consciousness come into being? And how is it that at the end of life in the body, does that consciousness reawaken, or is it something that's always been there?
Noah, does Buddhism say anything about that?
Absolutely. Buddhism and Hinduism both. This is the thing. Here in the West, we think of ourselves that we're born and we have a consciousness when we come from our mother's womb. But the true meaning of eternity means without beginning and without end. And so we existed, according to the Buddhist or the Hindu scripture, the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, that we were never born and we never die. That spark of us, it's always been around, and when the conditions are right, we come into physical being, but we've always been around. We're in that current, that cosmic current.
Mm-hmm.
And when we shed this mortal body, we go back to that cosmic current. And kind of the cool thing is, I lost my train of thought. We limit ourselves because we think that eternity begins once we're born physically, but we've always been here. And and it doesn't have to do with reincarnation too either. I'm losing my train of thought. I have so much on my mind. You guys you're hitting like philosophical questions that go back millennia that people have always had. And regardless of what you believe, I think that science can help us. Again, I like to rely more on myself than what other people say. But what science has proven, that two things. One, matter is neither created nor destroyed, so it's always around, which kind of confirms that eternity thing. The other thing is that we're all literally made from stardust. I read that in the American Journal of Medicine this week. They had a cool article on that we are literally stardust, which means, whether we were, part of a star, or we were a drop of rain over Africa, or we were a parrot in the rainforest, we live on constantly. And I don't necessarily believe in reincarnation, but I think that our physical attributes are recycled. But that photon or that thumb or the abiding self is the thing that it passes through and it goes back to the source. And that actually is consistent with ancient Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, prior to Moses coming in and squashing that whole belief that we're effervescent. We bubble up, we live, and once we live in a mortal life, we're back up into the source again. that make sense?
Yeah,
It does.
I like it.
It does. And Noah, just to further that a little bit, you really should go to this website because I can't find it right now, but I remember they did talk about stardust.
I will look. If you find it, post it on Facebook or something.
I just posted it in the chat room.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll post it on Facebook though too, because and I can't find it in here because they were talking about, they were talking about what? Oh, here it is. Is this it? They talk about how what happens to the life of a star, and they were comparing that and what happens when it dies, when a star dies. And I think there's 3 outcomes to what happens to a star when it dies. And then they compared that to near-death experience. I mean, this is pretty amazing information that I found. And again, I only just found this today, so I haven't been able to go through it all. But some of these things that you were just talking about now, I'm remembering in this article. So I think you would really love it.
I will definitely check that out. One other point I wanted to make about upbringing. There was a study done in the 80s where they interviewed Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Latter-day Saints, all these people that had near-death experiences. All of them saw the tunnel, which I think is a wormhole. The interesting part is, though, everybody that's non-Jewish, they all reported seeing a white light, a pure white light.
Mm-hmm.
People that were Jewish, even if they were non-practicing or, out of the faith or never practiced at all, they always saw blue. And the cool part is in Judaic law and in Kabbalah, God's described, the form of God or the higher power that we perceive is colored blue. It's called Shekinah. And so all of these Jewish people, whatever their beliefs aside, they always saw the light as blue, which I found really interesting, that there was some differentiation based on belief. It was the same feeling, same process, but they all described it as blue without even knowing, the point of that.
Is there any reference to the color pink as well that you know of?
I'm sorry, say again?
Is there any reference that you've heard of within any other religions with the color pink and death?
Not that I can think of. I could research that.
Because, again, and I'm trying to find this now as you were talking, in this article it talked about the color blue and the color pink. And the blue, again, they talked about how when a star recedes away, it gives off a blue color. When a star comes forward, it gives off a pink color or pink hue. And they related that because a lot of near-death experiences talk about this pink and blue color. And the blue, I guess it's referencing as you were leaving the body. And the pink is when you were coming back into the body. Again, Noah, this article, I think you'd really love it.
That's fascinating. And if you think about it, Anthony, when we're coming into this world, which we can't remember, maybe we see pink. Maybe we go to the pink light. I don't know.
Right.
Which, makes sense. But I don't want to tie up the line. I wanted to throw my 2 cents in there, and I appreciate everything you guys have shared tonight. I'm going to check out that article because it is fascinating. And I just wanted to bring kind of a multi-religion perspective in to help all of us try to make more sense of life and death and what that means.
Well, I just like the fact that I know that I'm made of stardust.
I know, isn't that cool? Kind of
That's
odd.
amazing.
Oh, God.
As Anthony rolls his eyes, he's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard the Moby song before.
Well, thank you, Noah. We always love having your insight on this show. I love it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Have a
Noah.
great night.
Have a great one. And I actually just found it, Lucy. Here it is. The beams of light are probably due to the Doppler effect, named after mathematician and physicist Christian Doppler. During such a phenomenon, blue-green light is created when stars, matter, or stardust approach us, and red-pink light is created when stars, matter, or stardust recede from us. And then they go into a conclusion about the red and pink blues are mostly like explained by Doppler effect, blah, 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 blah. The everlasting Big Bang, where two universes meet. They see the matter is coming toward them and the causal source that creates everything we know in the universe. This article, I have to completely read this through, because I think everything that just Noah just talked about is amazingly coming directly from this article.
That's amazing. And you know what's so weird? When you guys were talking about the light, I was thinking of pink light, and I never ever really delved into all of this, but it's like, I don't know, it's just the thought of pink light just came into my head, and I really like that idea that when a star is being created, it is a pink light.
Noah also just mentioned, too, I think what he was talking about, the top part of your thumb, like that little piece. Mm-hmm. Here I'm just reading something. Finally, near-death experience, people travel back as a dot, due both to gravity as well as, in theory, the coming together of the energy of the exotic body with the energy that has held the private tunnel open through the intra-universe wormhole tunnel through space and time. Now, if what Noah was talking about, how this little piece of light, what this article is talking about, and, you know, the ever controversial piece of paranormal phenomenon, the orbs, that everybody's talks about and is always debated, could that be one and the same? Could it be that orbs are these things?
Well, then that would probably justify a lot of what people feel orbs are. That orbs are, now this is on the side of the people that believe in orbs, that they are a spirit or a consciousness.
Well, I mean, if it's a spark of light that is talking about, and how this article is talking about how when we come back into our body we're this dot, and I think it's also said it too, that when it's leaving, it's this little spark that comes from your body and travels through the wormhole, as they were talking about, but we know it as quote-unquote a tunnel when we have those experiences. That could it be that orbs are in essence these little sparks of life? They're these sparks of consciousness that are the beings that we inertially are. You know, is this the soul? Is that what it means about the soul? I don't know. It's just
sort of like the soul in a raw form.
In its true form, I think. You know, it's what it is. It lives within us all the while. We carry it with us. It's at the moment of death when it starts to, for lack of a better word, come alive and generate and vibrate within the body, and then, you know, basically leave this physical form.
Well, it would make sense because the physical body is, in essence, it's falling away. So what does that leave? That leaves the consciousness in some kind of form. And maybe, you know, through the ages, people not knowing or people not having the scientific explanation, it does appear as an orb or a light or a speck. I mean, truly, we don't really have a definition of what consciousness, what our conscious beings appear, what we really look like.
As we always say, every time we tackle a topic,
we open up so much more.
We open up the wormhole of more questions that are going to make us crazy and baffle us to the point where we will be nonstop researchers till we die.
But that's awesome.
It's amazing. I don't know. I really do want to thank Howard for coming on. I know his story has been so popular over the years. I think it's been sort of categorized as the only true detailed near-death experience that's ever been told and written about. And so when I saw this, when I saw his information, I was, passing through YouTube channels, and I came across an interview that he had given, and I think it was on some channel. I don't know if it was History or not, but it really intrigued me enough to talk about. We never really had anybody, a guest on our show, to talk about near-death experience, especially someone who has pretty much gone the non-traditional route, into near-death experience, the horrible way. So I really do commend him for coming on, and his book is absolutely great. It's My Descent into Death. I do suggest everyone go out and get that book and read about it. I'm sure you'll probably learn more insight into your own life, and who knows, maybe that'll help you live your life,
It
Instead
is
of talking about death, it's your life.
Right. It is an excellent read, and one thing that I really do appreciate, and I know that there are many people out there that do say that they don't believe in God, they don't believe in a higher power, but I think for him to share that just makes me feel better, because I do believe in a higher power. I do believe that there's something else. And I'll say it again, I just imagine that not believing in that just seems so cold and so sad, because there's got to be more than what we have here. This is only part of it. This is only part of the journey. And I don't know how I know this, but I do know it's true that this is only part of our journey. There's so much more. There's so much more.
Well, I think we should travel and journey to find out who the Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week is.
Okay. The Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week this week is Ann Coles of Waldorf, Maryland. Ann is the owner-operator of Coles & Company, an online bookseller. She likes the monkeys. She likes stamp collecting, needlepoint, bones, house, Deep South Paranormal, ghost hunters, and, of course, she likes Paranormal Review Radio.
Congratulations, Ann. And don't forget, if you want to be a Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week, all you have to do is just like us. Like us on Facebook, Paranormal Review Radio.
Well, you know what? We've said it many times. One has to find their own truth. No one else can tell you what to believe. You have to feel it in your own heart for it to ring true with you. What Howard Storm found is his own truth. Now, does his message affect you? Only you can answer that. But the fact that he had such an effect on him is truly amazing. And hopefully his words will help you confirm what you already believe or make you think about things in a new light. We want to thank Howard for joining us tonight and sharing his story. So what do we believe when it comes to the paranormal? There's so many theories, so many different views of what the paranormal is. What are we searching for, and what have we found? We talk about the paranormal here with you every single week. So what does the collective think? Next Friday night, join us for our second roundtable discussion on the paranormal. We have invited a couple members of the paranormal community and even a skeptic to join us to talk about this thing that we love, but maybe we just don't completely understand it yet, the paranormal. Be here next week to listen and participate by calling into the show. We want to thank you for spending part of your Friday night with us every single week. It means so much to us. Anthony, thank you for being so special.
Aww.
So until next week, Parapeeps, never stop believing and have a paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Paranormal Review Radio.